My wife accused me of cheating to cover up her affair, and now she's trying to turn our friends against me. My name is Jake, 36M, and I thought my marriage to Laura, 34F, was solid. We've been married for almost a decade, and while we've had our share of ups and downs, I always believed that we were in this together. Recently, though, things started to feel off. It was subtle at first, a certain distance, a lack of interest in our conversations, and way too many late nights at work. I kept telling myself I was just being paranoid, but something deep down told me I needed to pay closer attention. It started with small things. Laura became incredibly protective of her phone. She'd keep it face down on the table, jump at every notification, and always seemed to be typing away, but never on a call when I was around. When I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd shrug it off, saying it was just work or that I was being ridiculous. I tried not to let it bother me, tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. But then, one night, she left her phone unattended while she was in the shower. The messages weren't what I expected. They weren't flirtatious or romantic in the way you'd expect to find in an affair. They were worse, cold, calculated, and detailed. They talked about me, of all things. The messages between her and some unknown contact were about setting me up, accusing me of cheating, and turning our friends against me. As I scrolled through the texts, I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was an elaborate setup. I took screenshots and forwarded them to my own phone, heart pounding with each click. The texts were detailed, discussing how she could make it look like I was the one having an affair. They planned to use a few staged photos, some fabricated emails, and even a fake hotel receipt. I felt sick reading it. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that she was unfaithful or that she was actively trying to ruin my life in the process. That night, I confronted her. I couldn't sit on this information, couldn't just play along like everything was fine. I showed her the screenshots and asked her what the hell was going on. At first, she played dumb, saying she didn't know what I was talking about. But as soon as I pressed, her demeanor shifted from denial to rage. She turned the tables, yelling at me for going through her phone, saying I was invading her privacy, that I had no right. Her voice grew louder, more intense, and soon enough, she was accusing me of exactly what she planned to accuse me of, cheating. The audacity took my breath away. She was flipping the script in real time, weaponizing my own discovery against me. She told me she'd already spoken to a few of our mutual friends about my suspicious behavior, planting seeds of doubt before I even knew there was an issue. It was as if she'd rehearsed this moment, anticipating every reaction I'd have encountering it with a ready-made story. I felt myself spiraling as she continued her tirade, tears welling up in her eyes, playing the victim so convincingly that for a moment I almost believed her myself. She went on about how she'd sacrificed so much for our marriage, how she'd put up with so much, and now I was the one betraying her. It was twisted, manipulative, and for the first time in my life, I saw a side of her I didn't recognize. The confrontation ended with her storming out, slamming the door behind her. She left me there, standing in the living room, holding my phone with the evidence, but feeling like I had somehow lost. I realized that while I had proof of her betrayal, she had the upper hand in the court of public opinion. She was already spreading lies, seeding doubts, and I was left with a pile of evidence that might as well have been invisible. Over the next few days, I found myself cut off from people I thought were my friends. Calls went unanswered, texts were ignored, and when I did run into someone, I saw the judgment in their eyes. She'd moved faster than I'd anticipated, reaching out to everyone, telling them her side of the story, painting me as the cheating husband and herself as the wounded, devoted wife. She was skilled at this game, playing the victim flawlessly, while I was left scrambling to figure out my next move. In a matter of days, she had taken control of our entire social circle. Friends I'd known for years began to distance themselves, avoiding me, giving me looks that spoke of betrayal and disappointment. I felt like a stranger in my own life, as if everything I'd built was crumbling around me, all because of one woman's lies. I knew I couldn't keep sitting back and letting her ruin me. I had to fight back, to find a way to expose the truth, but I had no idea where to start. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and anger. My social circle was shrinking by the hour, and I started feeling like a pariah in my own life. Laura had orchestrated her story so well that even family members were starting to give me strange looks. I could feel the shift every time I interacted with them. A tension, a hesitation, as if they didn't quite know how to treat me anymore. It was surreal, like watching my life unravel from the outside, powerless to stop it. I tried reaching out to a few close friends, hoping they'd believe me. First was my best friend, Kyle, 37M. I'd known him since college, and I thought he'd have my back no matter what. When I called him, he answered, but I could hear the doubt in his voice, the uncertainty. I explained everything, told him about the texts I'd found, the setup Laura was orchestrating. I was so sure he'd be on my side. "Look, Jake," he said, his tone cautious. "I don't know, man. Laura's been talking to everyone, saying you've been acting shady. It's not just the cheating, she said you've been. Distant, secretive. It sounds bad, dude. People are talking." I felt my stomach twist. Distant? Secretive? You know me, Kyle. I'd never do that. I'd never cheat on her. Yeah, but she's saying you have a gambling problem, that you've been hiding stuff from her, even putting the house at risk. You didn't tell me any of this, Jake? If that's true. It's not true, I interrupted, my voice desperate. None of it's true. She's making it all up to cover her own mess. She's been cheating on me, not the other way around. He sighed, and I could feel his hesitation through the phone. Look, man, I want to believe you, but Laura's not the type to make stuff up. I don't know what to believe right now. I think you two need to work this out, but it's hard for me to get in the middle of it. After the call ended, I sat there stunned. Kyle had been my rock, someone I thought would never question me, but Laura's influence had even turned him against me. She'd not only painted me as a cheater, but had crafted a whole backstory of lies, suggesting I was financially reckless, unstable, and morally compromised. I felt the walls closing in. If Kyle didn't believe me, I had little hope of convincing anyone else. Desperate, I decided to reach out to Laura's brother, Matt, 30M Matt, and I had always gotten along well, even more than she did with him at times. I figured that, at the very least, he might give me a chance to explain my side. I invited him over, figuring I could show him the screenshots, lay everything out for him, and get anyone, on my side. When he arrived, I could see the doubt in his eyes too. He looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with his keys, not quite making eye contact. Still, he agreed to hear me out. I laid it all out for him, from the messages I'd found to the way she was manipulating our friends and family. I handed him my phone, showing him the screenshots. He scrolled through them, his expression changing from skepticism to something resembling shock. "Damn," he muttered under his breath. This isn't what Laura told me." Relief washed over me. Finally, someone saw the truth. "Matt, I need your help. She's tearing my life apart with these lies. I can't just sit here and let her ruin everything I've built." He nodded, clearly torn. "Look, man, I believe you. These texts, this is messed up. But Laura's my sister. If I go against her, she's going to cut me out. She's already talking about how you're trying to isolate her, and if she finds out I've seen this, it's going to get ugly." "You don't understand," I pleaded. "She's trying to destroy me. She's already convinced half the town that I'm a cheat and a liar. I can't fight her alone." He looked down, avoiding my gaze. "I'm sorry, Jake. I believe you, but I can't be a part of this. I have to look out for my family." He handed my phone back and left without another word, leaving me standing in the doorway, feeling more alone than ever. It was like every avenue of support had been cut off, one, by the woman I'd once trusted with my life. Laura's plan was working flawlessly. I was isolated, trapped, with no one to turn to. At work, things weren't much better. I'd heard whispers, caught colleagues giving me side glances, and I knew the rumor mill was running wild. Laura had even managed to contact some of my coworkers, telling them about my affair and painting me as the bad guy. I felt like I was drowning, with no escape in sight. I decided I needed to confront Laura again. I'd made the mistake of reacting too emotionally the first time, but now I had to go in with a plan. I needed her to understand that I wasn't going to let her get away with this. She was twisting my life beyond recognition, and if I didn't act now, there wouldn't be anything left to salvage. I returned home that evening, determined to confront her with calm and resolve. As soon as I walked through the door, she was waiting for me, arms crossed, a smug look on her face. She knew I was spiraling, and she relished every moment of it. "Did you enjoy your little chat with my brother?" she asked, smirking. "He told me you tried to drag him into your web of lies." "Lies?" I shot back, incredulous. "You're the one who's been lying to everyone, twisting things to make me look like the bad guy." She shrugged, feigning innocence. "All I did was tell them the truth, Jake. If you can't handle the consequences, that's not my problem." I took a step closer, my voice low but steady. "Why are you doing this, Laura? What's the end game here? You're ruining my life, for what? Just to make yourself look good." She rolled her eyes, clearly bored with my accusations. "It's simple, really. I'm done with you. I just thought I'd get a little compensation for putting up with you all these years. And if that means you lose a few friends along the way, so be it. I clenched my fists, barely able to contain my anger. You're going to regret this, Laura. I'm not going down without a fight. She laughed, a cold, heartless sound that sent chills down my spine. Fight all you want, Jake. No one's going to believe you. You're already alone, and soon you'll have nothing left. As she walked away, I felt a surge of helplessness and rage. She was right about one thing: I was alone. But I wasn't done yet. I still had the evidence, and I knew there had to be a way to expose her for who she truly was. I just needed to figure out how. I spent the next few days digging through every scrap of evidence I had against Laura. I needed something definitive, something that couldn't be twisted or dismissed. But the more I looked, the more I realized that she'd been careful. Most of her messages to others were vague enough to avoid direct accusation, relying on insinuation and implication. She was skilled, far more manipulative than I'd ever realized. It was almost like she'd been planning this for a long time. Determined to find a crack in her facade, I decided to visit our bank. I wanted to see if there were any suspicious transactions, anything that might point to financial deceit or hidden accounts. To my shock, I found that Laura had been making significant withdrawals over the past few months, draining our joint savings little by little. I stared at the statements in disbelief. She wasn't just smearing my name, she was setting herself up to walk away with everything. After leaving the bank, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I needed more evidence, something solid that I could use against her. I remembered she had a private laptop that she never let me touch, claiming it was only for work. Until now, I hadn't thought much of it, but I was desperate. That laptop could hold the key to everything. When I returned home that evening, Laura wasn't there. She'd mentioned something about going out with friends, but I knew better. More than likely, she was with whoever she'd been seeing behind my back. This was my chance. I searched her closet, and there it was, her laptop, tucked away in a bag on the top shelf. I pulled it out and took it to the dining room table, my hands shaking as I opened the lid. It was password protected, of course. I tried a few obvious passwords, her birthday, our anniversary, but none of them worked. Frustrated, I leaned back, staring at the screen, my mind racing. I remembered she'd once mentioned how much she hated complex passwords, preferring something simple and easy. I tried her favorite actor's name, followed by a few random numbers, and to my shock, the screen unlocked. I scrolled through her files, my heart pounding. At first, it was the usual: work documents, photos, harmless things. But then I found a folder titled Personal, buried deep within another folder labeled with a code that looked like a random string of numbers and letters. I opened it, and my stomach twisted. Inside were chat logs, photos, and emails detailing her affair. I scanned through them, horrified by what I saw. Laura had been involved with multiple people, not just one. And it wasn't just physical. She'd been financially entangled with them, using our money to fund their escapades. There were receipts for expensive dinners, trips to resorts, even a few luxury items she bought as gifts. It was like a slap in the face. She'd not only betrayed me, but had been living a double life right under my nose. Then I found something even more incriminating: conversations where she plotted to frame me, even suggesting I'd been abusive to justify her actions. She discussed these plans in detail with one of her lovers, laughing about how easy it would be to turn everyone against me. I felt a wave of nausea as I read her words. I'd known she was manipulative, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. With the evidence gathered, I saved copies of everything to a flash drive, making sure I had a backup. I knew this was enough to expose her, but I needed to be smart. She'd already convinced most of our friends and family that I was the villain, so I had to approach this carefully. The next day, I contacted a lawyer. I explained the situation, showed him the evidence, and laid out everything Laura had done. He listened intently, his expression growing more serious as he reviewed the files. "You have a strong case," he said, finally looking up from the laptop. "But if you want to turn the tide, you need to go public with this. Not in a way that makes you look like you're attacking her, but in a way that presents the truth clearly and unemotionally." I nodded, already forming a plan. I decided to contact a few key people, friends and family members who still held some sway over public opinion in our social circle. I arranged a meeting with them, knowing that if I could sway even a few, the story would spread on its own. The meeting took place at a local cafe. I'd invited Kyle, Matt, and a few others who had once been close to both of us. When they arrived, I could see the skepticism in their eyes, the wariness. They didn't know what to believe, and I couldn't blame them. I started by showing them the chat logs, the emails, the financial records. I didn't embellish or add commentary. I let the evidence speak for itself. As they read through the documents, their expressions shifted from confusion to shock and then to something resembling anger. This can't be real," Kyle said, his voice trembling. "She did all of this and tried to pin it on you." Matt looked visibly shaken, staring down at the printed messages, his face pale. "I had no idea. She's my sister, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined. Jake, I'm so sorry. I didn't believe you, but this changes everything." The group sat in silence for a moment, processing what they'd seen. I could tell the tide was shifting. Laura's web of lies was beginning to unravel, and the truth was finally coming to light. But I knew this was only the beginning. She wouldn't go down quietly, and I had to be prepared for whatever she threw my way next. By the end of the meeting, I had their support. They agreed to spread the word, to correct the lies Laura had been spreading. It was a small victory, but it felt like a turning point. I left the cafe feeling a mixture of relief and dread, knowing that the battle was far from over. Laura would retaliate, and when she did, I needed to be ready. It didn't take long for Laura to find out that I'd met with our friends. The next morning, my phone blew up with calls and texts, most of them from her. I ignored the first few, letting them go to voicemail. But then I got a text that made my blood run cold. "I'm coming over, Jake. We need to talk. Now." An hour later, she showed up at my apartment, looking furious. She barged in without even waiting for me to open the door, her face flushed with anger. She barely looked like the woman I'd married. Her expression was twisted with rage, her eyes wild. She'd lost the calm composure that usually cloaked her manipulations, and now she was raw, exposed. "Do you think you're clever, Jake?" she spat, pacing around the room, her fists clenched. "Going behind my back, spreading lies about me? You're pathetic. A weak, miserable man who can't accept that he drove his own wife away." I stayed calm, meeting her glare. "Lies? Everything I told them was true, Laura. I have the proof, and you know it." She scoffed, tossing her hair back. "Proof? You don't have anything, Jake. You're just clinging to scraps, hoping someone will feel sorry for you. You're the one who ruined this marriage. You drove me to it." My patience snapped. I stepped closer, keeping my voice low but firm. "I didn't ruin anything, Laura. You did. You're the one who betrayed me, stole from me, and then had the nerve to play the victim. This ends now." She let out a cold laugh, her eyes narrowing. "Oh, you think you're so righteous, don't you? Well, I have news for you. You're not the only one who's been gathering evidence. You think your little group of friends can save you. I've been talking to our neighbors, our coworkers. I told them about your abusive tendencies, how you'd fly into rages and make me fear for my life. Do you really think they'll believe you over me?" The audacity of her accusations stunned me. She was trying to flip the narrative, painting herself as the victim of my supposed abuse. I could see her strategy now. She was setting me up, trying to make me look like the villain to protect her own secrets. The thought of it made my stomach churn. "You're sick, Laura," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You're so desperate to avoid responsibility that you destroy my life just to save your own skin. I won't let you get away with it." Her face twisted into a smirk. "What are you going to do, Jake? Go to the police? Tell them I'm the bad guy? Good luck with that. I've got text messages, photos, everything I need to make you look like a monster. And when I'm done, no one will believe a word you say." She turned to leave, throwing one last venomous look over her shoulder. "Oh, and by the way, don't think I won't take you for every penny in the divorce. I've already talked to a lawyer, and they're confident I'll get the house, the savings, everything. After all, I'm the poor, traumatized wife you abused, right?" She slammed the door behind her, and the echo seemed to rattle through my bones. I stood there, fists clenched, my mind racing. She was serious. She was planning to go public, to smear my name even further, and she had the gall to think she'd get away with it. I couldn't let that happen. I spent the next few days consulting with my lawyer, strategizing my next move. I knew this was going to be a brutal fight, and I couldn't afford any mistakes. Every step had to be calculated, precise. Laura had shown her hand, and now it was time to counter. My lawyer advised me to file a restraining order. It would complicate her narrative of me as an abuser, and it would keep her at a distance while we gathered more evidence. He also suggested that I file for sole possession of the house, citing her financial deceit and infidelity. It was a long shot, but it was better than sitting back and letting her destroy my life. The restraining order was granted within days. Laura's reaction was immediate and vicious. She started bombarding me with emails and text messages, each one angrier than the last. She claimed I was ruining her life, that I was vindictive, that she'd never forgive me for taking things this far. I barely recognized her anymore. This wasn't the woman I'd loved, the woman I'd married. This was someone entirely different, a stranger who'd taken over her body. One night, as I was going through the evidence again, I received a call from Matt. He sounded tense, almost nervous. "Jake, you need to see this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Laura's posted something online. It's bad." I opened my laptop and pulled up my social media account. My heart sank as I saw the post. Laura had written a long, detailed story about our marriage, painting me as an abusive, controlling husband who'd driven her to an affair. She described how I'd supposedly isolated her, made her feel worthless, and how she'd only found solace in the arms of another man because she'd been so desperate for affection. The post had already gathered hundreds of likes and comments, most of them sympathetic. Friends, family, even people I barely knew were expressing their support for her, calling me a monster, saying they'd always known something was off about me. It was like watching my life unravel in real time, my reputation torn apart with every comment, every like. I felt a surge of helplessness, followed by a burning rage. Laura had crossed a line, and now it was war. I gathered every scrap of evidence I had. The messages, the photos, the financial records. I was going to go public too, but in a way that left no room for doubt. The next morning, I met with Matt and a few other friends who still believed in me. Together we crafted a response. It was a carefully worded post, direct and unemotional, laying out the facts. I shared the financial records showing Laura's deceit, the chat logs revealing her betrayal, and the receipts for the extravagant expenses she'd hidden from me. I didn't attack her directly. I let the evidence speak for itself. When I hit post, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I'd done everything I could to protect myself, to defend the truth. Now it was up to the world to decide who they believed. The backlash was immediate. Laura's supporters were quick to defend her, claiming I'd fabricated the evidence, that I'd twisted the truth to make her look bad. But as more people saw the messages, the bank statements, and the cold, hard proof of her deceit, the tide began to shift. Comments started appearing on her original post, questioning her story, pointing out inconsistencies. People wanted answers, and Laura's carefully crafted victim narrative was starting to crumble. Laura didn't take it well. She responded with another post, doubling down, accusing me of hacking into her accounts and staging everything. But this time, people weren't so quick to believe her. The cracks in her story were too obvious, and her desperation only made her look more suspicious. She was unraveling, just as she tried to make me unravel. Then came the real bombshell. A few days after my post, I received an email from an anonymous account with a message that made my stomach drop. Attached were screenshots of messages between Laura and a man I didn't recognize, her affair partner. They discussed not only their relationship, but also their plan to drain my finances and leave me with nothing. They'd been planning this for months, if not years, carefully orchestrating a way to make me look like the villain while they walked away scot-free. The email ended with a simple note: "I thought you deserved to know the truth." I didn't hesitate. I printed out every single message, brought it to my lawyer, and we began the process of adding this new evidence to the divorce proceedings. With this, Laura's story wasn't just falling apart, it was imploding. She'd gone from being a scorned wife to an exposed liar, her every lie laid bare for the world to see. As word of the new evidence spread, Laura's few remaining supporters quickly went silent. I watched as she tried to salvage what was left of her reputation, posting frantic messages, trying to justify her actions, claiming I'd manipulated her, that I'd driven her to do these things. But no one was listening anymore. The people who'd once rallied behind her were now distancing themselves, too embarrassed or ashamed to admit they'd ever believed her. Laura's last-ditch effort came in the form of a public apology, a pitiful attempt to salvage her image. She claimed she'd been misguided, that she'd let her emotions get the better of her, that she hadn't meant to hurt anyone. She begged for forgiveness, for sympathy, but it was too little too late. The damage was done, and everyone saw through her empty words. The divorce process was swift after that. With the evidence in hand, I was able to secure the house, the savings, and the few assets we had left. Laura walked away with nothing but the clothes on her back, her reputation in tatters. I watched her leave our home for the last time, her head down, her once vibrant confidence now replaced by a hollow, broken expression. She was finally facing the consequences of her actions, and there was no one left to blame but herself. I thought that would be the end of it, that I could finally move on and start rebuilding my life. But the scars Laura left ran deeper than I'd realize. Even though I'd cleared my name, the betrayal had changed me. I was more cautious, less trusting, haunted by the memory of how easily someone I loved had turned against me. Friends reached out, offering their support, encouraging me to move on, but I struggled to let go of the anger, the bitterness. Months later, I heard through the grapevine that Laura had left town, trying to start fresh somewhere else, away from the fallout of her lies. I didn't care. She was a ghost to me now, a lingering reminder of the worst time in my life. I focused on my work, on reconnecting with friends, on building a future where I didn't have to look over my shoulder, waiting for the next betrayal. One evening, I received a call from Matt. He wanted to check in to see how I was holding up. We talked for hours, reflecting on everything that had happened, laughing about how surreal it all seemed in hindsight. He reminded me that I'd made it through the fire, that I'd survived, and that I was stronger for it. As I hung up the phone, I realized that he was right. I'd come out on the other side, bruised but not broken. Laura had tried to destroy me, to turn everyone I loved against me, but she failed. I'd taken back control, reclaimed my life, and I wasn't going to let her or anyone else take that away from me again. From that day on, I made a promise to myself. I would live my life on my own terms, never again giving anyone the power to define who I was or what I was worth. Laura's betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but in the end, it only made me stronger. And as I closed the door on that chapter of my life, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years, a peace that came from knowing I'd faced the worst, and I'd won.